when you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome, everyone, to the Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob. We are here to talk about some exciting things today. Dr. Bob, how are you?
I am doing okay.
Awesome.
No.
Just kidding.
I'm like, yeah, we need to chat for a while.
I'm
this is
kidding,
like, no,
I'm
I want to
kidding.
get right to the topic.
See, I'm the one today that's like, no, let's move this forward. No, back to how you are.
Yeah, well,
how are you?
I think I'm probably doing better than you because you've had a rough couple of weeks.
It has been rough.
Sick family members.
My husband had like a food poisoning, salmonella, something like that, and that was rough. And having to take care of the kids extra time was rough.
Yeah. I want to ask you. You asked me some advice. While Steve was sick, and I want to know what went through your mind when you told me his left side was in severe pain, and then I told you to watch out for signs of appendicitis. Tell me what went through your mind. Because
the first thing I thought was, that's right side. And why don't you know that?
I'm like, oh no, my skills as a physician
I just thought maybe you were busy or something, multitasking. I don't know, had little kids running around or something.
Yeah,
that's me.
In my defense, what I meant was, as long as the pain is not as severe as appendicitis pain would be, then Steve is probably going to be okay. Had nothing to do with right side versus left side. I know the appendix is on the right side.
I'm so glad to know that.
I'm just curious. I'm like, oh no, but
that was funny. Yeah, no, it took 8 days, at least 8-9 days. He had to get an IV twice. It was rough because I honestly, we didn't know what the issue was at the beginning anyway. So there's a lot of researching into that along with what's going on right now, which is so much.
Yeah.
Again, I have to say the first 3 months of this year have just been 2.5 months even have just been so insane as it relates to this particular movement and informed choice and what's happening. And of course, we know February is legislative season, but we haven't had a season like this. Actually, even in 2015 wasn't quite like this.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit more. And again, we've got the federal hearing, which we're going to talk about in another podcast. Isn't that interesting, though? We had the federal hearing also in 2015. It's like they both waited for measles outbreak.
Yeah.
It seems a little coordinated, perhaps.
Yeah.
But what we want to talk about today is
censorship.
Censorship,
right. Which I don't know. I kind of thought that was a thing of centuries ago. Or 50 years ago.
You never know what to believe when you see stuff flying around Facebook about, they're going to censor. I mean, actually, I remember in 2015 people worrying about that and trying to find an alternate way to stay connected. And yet here we are again, except this time it's official. This is something that was going around, and we're going to talk about all the people sort of involved in this. A desire for legislators and people to make it known that there is, quote, misinformation on Facebook regarding vaccines. And as a result, they have now, not just with Facebook, but we're looking at Amazon, potentially with Amazon and their Prime Video releases. We're looking at Pinterest has taken down entire pages of anyone that has anything that they consider misinformation. Etsy has taken in their handmaids, a shop for handmade goods, has taken down anything that they consider to be vaccine misinformation. And yet, I had somebody who had an item removed from their store that said force veggies, not vaccines. Okay, that's not any kind of misinformation. That's not something that's saying anything detrimental to the public. That was removed for a shirt that she had. I have that shirt, by the way. Not from her, but I have that with the same sentiment. And instead of that, though, she showed the link of all the things that were still allowed, which some of them were F anti-vaxxers. Anti-vaxxers kids should be are going to die early, things like that, very hostile and aggressive messages, those were fine. Those stayed up on Etsy. But the one that said force veggies, not vaccines, got taken down. And so we're seeing across multi-platforms, we know Google, there has been some connection there, and with YouTube. So we've got several main things here that are all having this coordinated effort to shut down the conversation. We're not shutting down hostility and hate and all the stuff that we see in this debate, not from our side, I'll say, but we're not shutting that down. What are we shutting down? We're shutting down your right to talk about it.
Right.
Your right to think about it. Your right to question things or have a discussion. And we're talking about that in the United States of America, that is a democratic country founded on the freedom of speech. So we talked about with Kevin Barry, we talked about the First Amendment rights and how religious exemptions being taken away threatens that. But we also now are talking about just the basic freedom of speech. So not only do you not get to decide what goes into your body or your child's body, but you're not allowed to even talk about what you think about what goes into your body or your child's body. Isn't that just... I mean, it's terrifying because what else could be hiding from, what else is being hidden from us?
Right. Well, I hope it backfires because we know already the movies that Amazon removed from their streaming service. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things Amazon is going to do, and you remove Vaxxed and a couple other movies from the streaming service. Well, the sales of those movies have skyrocketed, and movies and sales of anti-vaccine books went way up,
quote unquote.
Quote unquote. And
what they deemed,
right. And I don't know where it is in here. They kind of list a couple of the what they consider, vaxxed and shoot 'em up. Mm-hmm. Is the truth about vaccines.
And this affected the book that Dr. Paul Thomas and Jennifer,
right, I know. So they named a couple of quote unquote anti-vaccine books. Dr. Miller's review of
critical studies,
mm-hmm. and Paul Thomas's vaccine friendly plan. They named those books in articles online, BuzzFeed articles and other articles. And guess what? Sales of those books went way up. Those books are like in the top 100. I'm kind of wondering, why didn't they mention my book?
I know.
I was kind of like, I kind of felt left out. I don't know.
They've got more for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. And but sales of my book actually went way up during the last week.
Really?
Yeah. Simply because by mentioning them, they are
advertising for them.
Focusing attention on this issue. And
but before we get into like the specifics on what you're gonna talk about, what Adam Schiff, is that his name? He's also from California.
Right.
Ironically, what he wrote to Mark Zuckerberg about this, his open letter to him, and I'm going to talk about Congressman Bill Posey and his response. But before we talk about that, let's just talk about this idea of censorship. Okay, so regardless of your stance, now I'm very aware, and congratulations on 30,000 downloads in February, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
For the vaccine conversation.
Woohoo.
That's really exciting. We've essentially doubled every month. We just started this a couple months ago. What does this tell you? It tells you that people are needing to talk about this. They want to have this conversation, and they're not given the ability to. And so there was a need for this that we hadn't anticipated. So let's talk about this idea of censorship. Not being able to discuss something that is complex, especially something like a medical intervention, something that has two sides to the story, though they will want you to believe there is only one. What does this mean? If you're somebody, so what I was going to say is we have listeners on all spectrums, people that fully vaccinate, people that selectively vaccinate, people that are vaccine-free, people are ex-vaxxers, people with vaccine injury stories. We kind of have everybody that's listening, and the same type of people that we created our website for everyone. And so for people who support vaccines but are smart enough, and I'll say smart enough to not support mandates because they understand how complicated this is. What do you all think about this idea of Facebook controlling the information that is given? Does Facebook assume you're not smart enough to be able to decipher between information? Does Facebook think that you are not educated enough to be able to see both sides of it and come to an opinion that you form on your own? doesn't it kind of worry you that they want only one side of this out there? Because if I were just a random person who had never been involved in this, the fact that anybody's cutting off one side of this discussion makes me think, what could they be hiding? What else? What don't they want you to know? Because isn't that kind of what, fascist governments have done in the past? They didn't want information open about what was the other side or another option. They just wanted people to have what they gave them. This is the filtering of information, right? Isn't it concerning to everyone, every single person, that you are now going to be getting a smaller version of what's out there, and it's going to be handpicked for what they think supports what they want you to know versus what the truth is?
Right. And has that ever worked out well in history? I mean, there's been many governments that have exercised censorship on their population. Mm-hmm. And two questions I have, has it ever worked out well for any of those governments? But also, that censorship never continued. It's not like they started censoring something and then, 500 years later, no one's talking about it still. Yeah. I mean, censorship always comes to an end. There's no way you can continuously censor, vaccine safety advocacy information. You just can't. You can try now, but honestly, that's just going to make people look for it harder. It's going to make the educated public, find it in other places and now even want it even more.
Or even wonder what are they hiding?
No,
then?
You're right. They're wondering what is it about vaccines that might be out there that the government feels they have to censor? I need to figure out what you're hiding. But again, it's going to make them look for it even harder.
And more people are going to become aware of this issue once you start to realize the land of the free is no longer allowing for this type of freedom. This is why people think of America as the greatest nation in the world, because you don't have the persecution for things like your religion and your views on politics and whatever it is. You're supposed to have free reign for your ability to have opinions and thoughts and speech to say whatever that you want. That's a constitutionally protected freedom that has been upheld over and over and over again, and yet this is going the completely other way. And I don't really think people know it's happening. So it's just been talked about the last couple weeks. Today, today today is, what's today? March 7th. So I don't know when you all will be listening to this, but soon. So this is called Combating Vaccine Misinformation. This came out today from the Facebook newsroom. Okay. And this is by the VP of Global Policy Management, Monica Bickert. That's her name. This is what it says. We are working to tackle vaccine misinformation on Facebook by reducing its distribution and providing people with authoritative information on the topic. We are starting by taking a series of steps. And of course, I do sort of feel like all this has already started already, but they make it seem like it hasn't happened yet. But anyway, it says, 1, we will reduce the ranking of groups and pages that spread misinformation about vaccinations in news feeds and searches. These groups and pages will not be included in recommendations, and they will not be included in predictions when you type in a search. Okay, they won't be filling that in for you.
Wow.
And I had somebody message me the other day, say they were searching for my page. They wrote my name in and there was nothing coming up. They had to write my whole full name in.
Wow.
And so I'm wondering if this is part of that.
And this is when you search in Facebook.
Yeah, search in Facebook, right. Though we know this is probably going to branch out into Google as well because of what they've said. So it says, when we find ads that include misinformation about vaccinations, we will reject them. We also removed relating targeting options like, quote, vaccine controversies, quote, end quote. For ad accounts that continue to violate our policies, we may take further action such as disabling the ad account. We won't show or recommend content that contains misinformation about vaccinations on Instagram, Explore, or hashtag pages. We are exploring ways to share educational information about vaccines when people come across misinformation on this topic. So before I go into what it says about how this will work, I want to know, what is misinformation?
I just wrote that down on my sheet of paper.
Funny.
I know exactly.
What constitutes?
Exactly. I know.
And I just shared this on my Facebook thing like an hour ago, not while we were working, don't worry. This is what I said. Don't confuse misinformation with a dissenting opinion.
Right.
Because that is what they are doing. They are saying, because your opinion does not agree with what we want you to think, what the CDC says and what we have designed for you, because just that simple fact, it is considered misinformation. And how scary is that? The fact you can't even disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, like, so if I'm going to write a post about the fact that the MMR vaccine triggers seizures in about 1 out of every 3,000 babies who get that shot, and I want to write an article about that, that is suddenly misinformation. That is anti-vaccine information.
Even though it's 100% truthful.
Right, exactly.
And it's a fact.
Right, and I feel like the reality is, that the actual truth about the matter is, the way I see it, there are kind of 4 levels of information. One, there's pro-mandate, and then there's just, which is the extreme minority, the extreme left or right. I don't know what side that would be on, but
that's the troll side.
Right. and then there's just straightforward medical information, just the broad range of vaccine information, vaccine, benefits, vaccine issues, and that's probably a huge, a big long list of information. And then there's the information that we tend to talk about, which is basically vaccine risk. The known side effects, the issues about diseases and
data on outbreaks.
Yeah,
and
data.
Like
just that's kind of where we tend to fall. Sort of, we'll talk about vaccines and we'll talk about diseases. We're kind of right somewhere in that middle, and we're every single thing we say is true and accurate and factual. Okay. And then there is the extreme other side that is like, say, what you could say is truly anti-vaccine information. People who are basically sharing facts and truths, giving you real data, and their conclusion is, therefore, you should not vaccinate. Therefore, you shouldn't get this vaccine because it's way too dangerous because these reasons.
And therefore, all vaccines are dangerous.
Right. And now, even though the side effects they're stating are real and they're actually using some facts, they're kind of leading you to a conclusion that you should not get that vaccine.
Which is totally fine for them, their own conclusion.
Right, and they have every right to conclude that and even suggest that. What I'm saying is, you almost never see that.
Right.
You almost never see somebody share facts about side effects and then say, don't get this vaccine. That really is, that's kind of the anti-vaccine very, very end of the spectrum. What we're going to see, though, is we're going to see Facebook eliminating all information that simply says anything negative about vaccines.
So the bottom 2 categories completely.
Right. The bottom 2 categories are the one that's like our category that's a huge middle ground. We're just talking about scientific information because we never say don't get an MMR vaccine because of that seizure risk. We just say
even if
there's
we
a seizure risk.
How is that misinformation? To me, a misinformation means there's something that is factually incorrect.
Right. And almost none of the anti-vaccine information is factually incorrect.
Right. It's not like they're just making things up like, we have 400 vaccine doses or something.
Right. But they are saying they're just kind of, they're skewing it. They're only saying one side. Right. So it almost would say it shouldn't be misinformation. It should say one-sided information if they want to be accurate about it.
Because it's their opinion on the topic. It's their opinion on it.
So I'd love to see Facebook try to put that in their list of criteria. We're going to get rid of one-sided information. Well, that's even
But that would be
worse.
Us too, right? Though?
Right. But that's even worse when it comes to censorship. If they're going to only get rid of misinformation, which is incorrect information, there'd be almost nothing to get rid of. So they're not. They're going to get rid of one-sided information.
They're going to get rid of any side that doesn't agree with the CDC information. Right. That's what it's coming down to. Because everybody should have a right to, like on your news feed, if you have friends that are, think that people who don't vaccinate are one way, and then if you have friends that are the other, you're seeing both things. You have a choice to unfollow someone. You have a choice to unfriend someone. You have a choice to decide what information that you're getting. It doesn't need to be done for you, because then it's not even giving you the option to weigh both sides. And we know there are both sides. And the irony there is in one of the testimonies in the Senate thing, that 18-year-old kid was talking about the fact that there needs to be, both sides need to be talked about. And he grew up in a situation where it was one-sided because his mom was one way. And he realized that in his debate class in high school, because he's in high school. I'm so glad he's an expert on all this. He decided that there are always two sides. It's like the irony of him saying that in defense of mandatory vaccines is just not lost on me. But the second half of what they say for Facebook, it says how this is. And what I did say on my thing, I said, don't confuse misinformation with a dissenting opinion. Just because the viewpoint doesn't agree with yours doesn't make it untrue. And that's what you were saying. But back to what Facebook says, how this is going to work, how their new censorship policy is going to work. Leading global health organizations such as the World Health Organization and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have publicly identified verifiable vaccine hoaxes. Okay, whatever that means. If these vaccine hoaxes appear on Facebook, we will take action against them. So what does that mean? What's a vaccine hoax?
Right. Vaccines cause autism because Dr. Andrew Wakefield found it to be true in his research study.
That's what they
That's
say,
what
right?
they would consider, a vaccine hoax.
And just, so if you haven't seen all these episodes, and I don't think we've actually even talked about that, but if you've heard that theory that this is what Dr. Wakefield found and this is what he said. We talked about this in the middle ground, but it never aired because one of the doctors mentioned that same thing. Fraudulent study, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure at some point we might get into this, but just to summarize, that is not what he found. He found that there were gastrointestinal issues that were consistent with children with autism, and about 3/4 of the parents had said that those symptoms had increased dramatically after having an MMR vaccine. Never in his study did he say.
So the conclusion was we need to do more research.
Yes.
We need to look further into
and
this.
it was about gastrointestinal health.
I feel like we shouldn't say Wakefield too many times because then they're going to censor that. Maybe.
But this is not Facebook.
Okay. Oh, but I know, but
I know. Okay. So anyway, it says, the other thing says, for example, if a group or a page admin posts this vaccine misinformation, we will exclude the entire group or the page from recommendations, reduce these groups and pages distribution in news feeds. This is important. They will reduce the page's distribution in news feeds and search, and we will reject the ads. They will keep these things from showing up on people's news feeds, plain and simple. It says, we also believe in providing people with additional context so they can decide whether to read, share, or engage in conversations about information they see on Facebook. We're exploring ways to give people more, quote, accurate information from expert organizations about vaccines at the top of the newsfeed. So essentially, and this just came out today, right before I headed over here, they're basically saying they are only going to accept information from the World Health Organization and the CDC. Well, hey, lucky for them, that's the only stuff that we quote. I mean, the irony there is everything that we use is from the Department of Public Health, depending on the state, or the CDC or the World Health Organization. It's not like we're using stuff from some source. I don't know what they're talking about.
I've opened Joe's granola journal, a few times.
Dr. Joe, you mean?
Yeah, Dr. Joe. Yeah, he's a chiropractor. But
well, those things aren't real, so yeah.
No offense to chiropractors.
We love chiros.
I feel like I can joke about chiropractors because I go to one.
Yeah.
So it's okay for me to joke. Although none of the chiropractors ever find my jokes funny, and I don't get that.
That's not because of the chiros.
Okay. Anyway,
I love chiros. Anyway, so let's talk about Adam Schiff.
Right. So I think again, Adam Schiff he's a member of Congress from the 28th district in California.
Told you.
Right. So where in California is that?
His last name is so close to saying a bad word that it just really wants me to say it.
So Adam Schiff. So I guess I want to start off by saying that I feel like as a group, legislators deserve our respect, just kind of as a group. Right. And then if there's a legislator you might disagree with and you might not like what they're doing, we're going to then kind of try to, I guess, combat and kind of some of their agendas. But I feel like I don't want to be too disrespectful to a legislator.
Am I being disrespectful? Did I say something?
No. I'm not just saying kind of just like in general, I like to kind of treat them a little more respect. I mean, because their job can't be easy, honestly. But here's basically what Adam did, or this is what he
Mr.
signed
his name to, I should
say.
Right,
this is what he signed his name to. So he wrote a letter March 1st to Jeffrey Bezos, who's the CEO of Amazon. And I'm just going to basically read. You can Google search this.
And he also
sure
wrote to Mark
it.
Zuckerberg, I think the same thing. But anyway, so
Okay,
read this one.
right. So basically, I'll just sort of a few highlights. It is important that we explore the quality of information that people receive that directly impacts the health and well-being of Americans. Anti-vaccine information is a direct threat to public health, and it's reversing progress made in tackling these vaccine-preventable diseases. I guess I just want to pause when he says something that's misinformation itself. There has been no reverse in the progress of tackling vaccine-preventable diseases. Measles is not increasing; it's always just up and down.
I agree. And then in the Senate hearings, they say the same thing. They make it seem like something's going downhill fast as far as vaccination rates.
Whooping cough is on the increase because the vaccine doesn't work well enough to eliminate it. So right there is some misinformation. Then he says, this next quote comes from an actual federal resolution that is in Congress right now that they're trying to pass what I call Yay Vaccines federal resolution. This came out like 2 years ago. And no, they couldn't get it passed. It's not a law. It's just a federal resolution. It just means Congress is making a statement in support of vaccines. This is a quote from that resolution. There is no evidence to suggest that vaccines cause life-threatening or disabling diseases. And
diseases.
Right. No, that cause no life-threatening or disabling diseases.
Not injuries, but diseases.
Right. Yeah. So maybe he's getting away with this obviously false statement by, of course. Well, no, that's even not true because you can get a live measles infection from the MMR vaccine and die from it.
Right, but they think that measles is not dangerous then. It's only dangerous if you're an unvaccinated person, right? If you're previously vaccinated, it's not.
So I don't know how he can say there's no evidence that suggests that vaccines cause life-threatening or disabling diseases because they do. There's no scientist in the world that's gonna agree with that statement. Yeah. So anyway,
we need like a bell that every time he says something wrong, that we can be like, beep.
He says Washington State declared a public health emergency due to a measles epidemic. It had reached 30
25
people.
cases.
25 cases is when 26. They declared an emergency.
State of emergency.
Right. Whereas, which is very interesting. No one died, and it is not spread far and wide. And again, he also says we effectively eliminated measles from the United States decades ago by vaccines. And we know the year measles was declared eliminated, there were 86 cases that year. So no, we've never eliminated it. So that's another false statement. He says vaccines surface on websites where many Americans get their information. Among them, Amazon. He says Amazon is in a unique position to shape consumption of information.
Okay, stop right there. Amazon's in a unique position to shape, as in shape viewpoints, not just shape what you get. They're shaping your belief system. What he's saying is you have the ability, and isn't that alarming that anybody could be shaping your viewpoint based on what they decide to show you or not show you?
Yeah, it is.
It's just like a news station, same thing with the media. They're literally picking and choosing what to show you. So that's what you think is happening based on whatever they show you. And even if that's a limited portion of what's really going on.
Right.
That's just crazy.
And this letter is actually written to Amazon. Did I say it was written to Facebook?
No, you said Amazon, but he also wrote to Facebook.
Okay, right. Harmful anti-vaccine messages have been able to thrive and spread. If a concerned parent consistently sees information in their Amazon searches or recommendations that cast doubts on the safety or efficacy of vaccines, it could cause them to disregard the advice of their children's physicians and of public health experts. So they're worried if you see this information on Amazon that it's going to cast doubt. And I don't necessarily get it. I never search Amazon for information. I search Google.
Yeah.
And I mean, gosh, if this
but they have that
hits
covered
Google,
too, so don't worry.
If this hits Google, oh my gosh. But I mean, no one searches Amazon, but who knows? But repetition of information, even if false, can often be mistaken for accuracy.
But isn't that funny? Because that's kind of what they do, isn't it? A lie told enough times.
Well, I know. Vaccines are
safe and effective.
In fact, it's interesting. In this letter, he says vaccines are effective and safe.
Yeah.
Which I found interesting. He didn't use the catchphrase "safe and effective." He switched it around and said vaccines are effective and safe. Additionally, even parents and guardians who seek out accurate information about vaccines could unwittingly reach pages and videos with misinformation. Again, who's deciding what's accurate? And again, he says, videos providing medically or scientifically inaccurate information, including some with misleading titles. Again, what they really mean is one-sided. That's the only accurate way they can portray this. It's not that it's misinformation or inaccurate. It's what they really mean is they want to weed out one-sided information.
But it's not, because if they did that, then they would weed out all the stuff that was super pro-vax too.
Right.
They're not weeding out one-sided information. They're weeding out stuff that disagrees.
Right. Exactly.
That's what they're doing.
Exactly.
We're talking about people that are not simply going along with the status quo and just saying yes and not questioning. What they're saying is they don't want those people to exist, and therefore let's get rid of that. But there are doctors in these movies. There are people who are researchers and scientists.
Yeah, I've seen all those movies, all those documentaries, and every time I'm watching these documentaries, every single fact, maybe 99% of what I see in those movies is accurate. Yeah, it's very one-sided. All these movies that talk that are kind of advocating for vaccine safety, they are one-sided. I think we all have to admit.
But that's because they're bringing in a voice to something that's never talked about.
But it's all accurate, one-sided information. So again, I don't.
Well, they might
like
not like it. They might not like that information's out there, but it's true.
So what Adam Schiff is asking of Amazon, specifically 4 things. He wants Amazon to provide him with answers on the following questions. Does content which provides medically inaccurate information about vaccines violate your terms of service? What actions do you currently take to address misinformation related to vaccines? Do you accept paid advertising from anti-vaccine activists or groups? How much has been spent? What steps do you currently take to prevent anti-vaccine videos or information from being recommended to users? And again, that should scare everybody. They want Amazon to take steps to prevent anti-vaccine videos. Are there other things they take steps to prevent that are anti?
I've never seen this conversation ever exist before.
Right, it's only about vaccines.
And who's deciding what is anti? Who is deciding what is misinformation? Who is deciding what is not truthful enough or whatever? Again, I know we've said this so many times, but just the fact that you're raising a question about it is going to be considered misinformation. Just because you are telling the truth about something that does not follow the traditional narrative means you are, in their eyes, presenting misinformation. But it's not misinformation. It is just the other side of the story. Right. And that is crazy to me.
And I think that was sort of the kind of the epitome of my vaccine book. It was both sides. You shared both sides. In fact, I got a lot of criticism from the anti-vaccine side saying that I did share the disease side and the vaccine benefit side way too thoroughly, kind of for their taste.
Okay, so let me read. This is from Bill Posey. So he put this out 3 days later, March 4th. Okay. And this is to Mark Zuckerberg, for Facebook. He says, and this is the title, "If vaccines do not cause injuries, why has the Vaccine Injury Trust Fund paid out $4 billion," and he has the exact total, "for vaccine injuries? Dear Mr. Zuckerberg," and he says, "I am supportive of childhood vaccinations. I believe parents should have their children vaccinated against certain vaccine-preventable illnesses, but I also respect the right of parents to make fully informed medical decisions, including those regarding vaccinations. Decisions about vaccinations, like all medications, should be decided based on a family's medical history, including allergies and history of autoimmune diseases, as well as other factors. I also agree that vaccines can have life-threatening and debilitating effects on some children and adults. The number of serious adverse reactions may be small in a population level, but to children who suffer lifelong debilitation and the families that care for them, it is no small matter. It is something they live with every day. It is life-altering and often life-consuming. And so he says, a media report suggests that Facebook's considering limiting the free speech of Americans who present safety concerns about vaccinations online, including on Facebook and within Facebook groups. I have some questions about this matter, and I would like some facts regarding blatantly false information you've received in a letter from Representative Adam Schiff. That letter was February 14th to Mark Zuckerberg. So the one that you read March 1st was to Amazon.
Right.
The letter states this is what he says. The letter states there is no evidence to suggest that vaccines cause life-threatening or disabling diseases. He quoted Adam Schiff in that. And then what Bill Posey says is the Institute of Medicine, the Centers for Disease Control, and manufacturers all acknowledge that vaccines can cause harm to infants, children, and adults. The vaccine injury table listing a wide range of more than 50 adverse reactions for the recommended mandated vaccines, and he includes the link. I have serious concerns that Facebook, based on false statements and similar ill-informed assertions, so he's calling out the misinformation from Adam Schiff on this,
right,
may initiate limits on the free speech of Americans who enjoy the community sharing of information and ideas online through Facebook. Okay, and then he continues, and he says, there is likely not a more contentious topic in medicine today than vaccinations. As a legislator who has monitored these safety concerns while serving in the Florida legislature and since entering Congress in 2008, I know there are many layers to this issue, including concerns about the fidelity of some of the safety studies conducted in the last 20 years. Vaccines, like every medication, have risks and benefits that have to be taken into consideration by the FDA in the licensing process. One of the most valuable resources available online from the manufacturer and the FDA is the package insert from each vaccine. The package insert is the FDA-approved statement about the product, the ingredients, the known risks and benefits, as well as information about contraindications. It is speculated that serious reactions are rare, but they do exist. He goes on to talk about the National Library of Medicine, talking about the MMR vaccine, how it can cause seizures, deafness, brain damage, and very rarely death. In fact, February 4th, 2019, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services report notes that the federal government has compensated over 440 children for MMR-related injury claims because vaccine injuries do occur. Now retired Congressman Henry Waxman spearheaded legislation creating the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program in the 1980s, which was signed into law by President Reagan. The NVICP was designed as a no-fault alternative to the traditional system to compensate those who suffer injuries. According to this report, over $4 billion has been paid out to over 6,300 people for their injuries. Including between 500 and 700 individuals just in the last 4 years. The number of children and adults compensated is 400% higher than it was a decade ago, and 600% higher than it was in 1999, which means the injuries are increasing. He says vaccines hold a unique place in our society. They are the only medications that are mandated by state governments based on federal recommendations, but also having liability protection for manufacturers. As such, it is critically important for the public to have access to open and honest dialogue. And this is it, right? That's the truth. Right. This is so complicated. We know injuries are happening. It is crucial. This is the only thing that's mandated without liability protection. This is so crucial that this conversation is open and honest. He says it's also critically important that we remain vigilant to ensure everything that we do is done to make sure vaccines are as safe as possible, particularly since the government is mandating these to perfectly healthy children. As you know, medical science is not stagnant. One has to simply look at the progress in brain research and neuroplasticity to see how, and the human microbiome, to understand to see how scientific knowledge is always evolving. It says in the 1960s through the 90s, we used an oral polio vaccine in the United States because it was live virus. Sometimes it actually transmitted the polio virus. As a result, they changed the use. So this is a perfect example of when the science wasn't settled.
Right.
And sorry that this is so long, but this is good. This is good stuff. And so he says, Rotoshield, that vaccine in 1999 was recalled because there were cases of intussusception, which was a serious adverse event reported in infants. And so they changed some things about it. Like his point is that things have been adjusted and changed. He said the compensation of Hannah Poling in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program highlighted that mitochondrial dysfunction may be a risk factor for development of, quote, autism-like features, according to the CDC director, Julie Gerberding, who works now for Merck,
right?
A manufacturer of vaccines. That's going to be talked about in our conflict of interest thing that we keep talking about, but can't quite get to. So here's where he says Facebook's important. The word of mouth discussion, such as that on Facebook, is one of the ways common elements of vaccine injuries become known and can become addressed. Okay? So by censoring that, you're limiting the right for parents to discuss vaccine injuries of their children. And I know there are people out there right now saying yes out loud while they're listening to this. Like, yes, exactly. It says... He says, I have refrained from portraying that group of parents who talk about vaccines as, quote, anti-vaccine, because that is a bullying tactic being used by individuals online and the media rather than an accurate reflection of the thousands of parents who are expressing concerns about safety and asking the federal public health authorities to conduct higher quality research to reduce the risk of seizures, brain injury, and other life-altering adverse events. That deserves an amen. I haven't read this.
Yes.
I had this on my phone, but I have not read it yet. But oh my God, listen to what he just said. That is exactly it. He's not going to call us anti-vaccine because that's a bullying tactic.
Yes,
he
exactly.
is right, 100%. And who's starting the bullying? He says it's used by the media and individuals online. This is a tactic to make these people seem like they don't have accurate information. Oh, I'm loving this so much right now.
Yeah.
And he says, in fact, some of the parents engaged in such discussion believe that a particular vaccination may have contributed to the decline and adverse health outcomes of their children. Addressing vaccine safety issues that have persisted for decades is best addressed by not silencing, by not bullying one side or the other, but engaging in vaccine safety research program that is independent, that will make vaccines safer, and develop a better understanding of the risk factors for infants, children, and adults. He says, I appreciate Representative Schiff's question, and I have a few of my own. Do you, as the CEO of Facebook, believe in free speech? Okay, that's question number one. Do you believe in free speech? 2, do you, as the CEO of Facebook, see the role of Facebook as a forum for open dialogue on topics of interest by the public? Simple, right? Number 3, if Facebook should decide to begin judging the medical accuracy of a statement posted by the public and by organizations, what will be the standards utilized? For example, he said, oh my God, I love this guy. For example, the letter written by U.S. Representative Adam Schiff includes blatantly false information. He said, would Facebook ban his letter from being posted? I could not love this guy more right now. I can't believe I haven't read this yet. He said, does Facebook accept paid advertising from pharmaceutical companies that produce vaccinations and are offered product liability protection through the programs? Do you accept advertising from medical associations that promote vaccination, like the AAP, the AMA, recipients of grants, etc.? Okay, that's his other question. And then let's see his last thing. Question number 5, what action has Facebook taken to address the bullying of individuals who discuss vaccine injury by individuals paid to promote vaccine policies, sometimes referred to online as trolls? And this is so true. This is happening. Oh my God, this is so amazing, this letter. Number 6, recent news articles have suggested that Facebook has a deboosting code. Is that true? And has Facebook deployed, or are you considered deploying deboosting code to limit pages whose owners discuss vaccine safety and related issues? He's addressing this idea of limiting visibility on people's news feeds, which we know has happened, and it's happened to me. I told you about that myself.
Yep.
And the last question he says is, reports indicate Facebook may label some individuals as trolls. Is this true? And if so, has a troll designation been assigned in relation to the vaccine safety discussion? I look forward to a prompt response to this important topic. Member of Congress Bill Posey. Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
That was really long, everybody. And sorry, Dr. Bob.
No,
That was so long, but
I got some work done while you were.
Oh my God, this was March 4th, 2019. This is incredible. What a great response.
Right, I know it is, and it'd be interesting to see if Facebook or Amazon paying attention to that. Senator Posey is the senator who basically received William Thompson's CDC research information. William Thompson, he's basically the whistleblower that claimed that researchers at the CDC literally burned research data that showed a relationship between the MMR vaccine and autism. And Senator or Representative Posey, what is a senator? Congressman Posey. He's the really one of the only congressmen that listened to William Thompson. Yeah, and so again, he's a big supporter of free speech. But
this letter,
it's amazing.
It just totally destroys Adam's letter.
Right, it does.
There's nothing that Adam said that was convincing and showed he had a knowledge on this topic in what he said. Right. It seemed very simple and obviously written by
lobbyists. But you're not going to see Posey's letter show up in any Facebook searches now.
Not just that, but it won't be covered on NPR.
Right.
It won't be covered on all these things like Adam Schiff's letter got covered. But I encourage you guys all to go search that response. He talks about everything. He talks about vaccine safety. He talks about victims of vaccine injury. He talks about parents who are supporting their children. And he talks about the rights to free speech. What more could you ask for in 3.5 typed letters on letterhead from Congress than what he just gave us?
Right. I know, exactly. And,
oh my God.
And the American public should be very, very concerned if their federal government is willing to state the claim that there is no evidence that any vaccines cause any severe life-threatening diseases or conditions. They're basically saying there's no evidence of any severe vaccine injury at all. If your government is willing to make that statement, then what are they going to do to you? I mean, they'll keep throwing unlimited vaccines without placebo-controlled safety research at us, and they're going to start mandating it. And that's why I think Americans are going to start standing up to this.
Well, the irony of that is even the concept of safe and effective is misinformation.
Right.
Saying that they are safe and effective is not accurate because they are not safe for all.
It's safe-ish. And
they're not safe for all.
Effective-ish.
Or safe enough or effective enough like we said. You said in one of our speaking things.
Somebody on an email thread I was on told me something very interesting. Mark Zuckerberg last year was in very hot water with the federal government. Do you remember that? Where he had to appear before Congress. And basically, Facebook was being accused of malfeasance. I forget what it was. I
think it had to do with some type of freedom of information, personal information of users being given.
Right.
Conducting data on your likes and dislikes, and he was accused of selling that information or giving that information.
Yes, exactly. And so Mark, so Facebook
he doesn't have a clean record. Let's
right.
Put it that way.
But Facebook was basically at risk of having to pay millions or billions of dollars in fines to the federal government for those violations. And now, interestingly,
maybe that got wiped clean.
The government is now asking Mark Zuckerberg to help them with the big pharma's message.
Hey, this is scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Well, I'm not making any claims. We don't know if the threat of millions or billions in fines to Facebook happened last year, and now Facebook is now caving to the government demands. I don't know if it's related.
Correlation does not mean causation.
Absolutely,
Dr. Bob.
They're unrelated.
Haven't you learned anything?
We need to do a placebo-controlled trial to figure this out. So, well, I want to. Maybe wrap this up maybe on a lighter note, unless you had more more scientific data to talk about.
I just want to post. I'm going to post about that thing. Yeah. That was an incredible letter.
It is.
I give major kudos.
Well, I want to maybe lighten this up a little bit just with some talk just about basically there's an article written written by Helena Fairfax in September of 2015. It's entitled 19 Quotes on Censorship to Celebrate Banned Books Week. And you can find this online. What website is this? It's on BookBub. Yeah, BookBub. And so basically in celebration a few years ago of Banned Books Week. I didn't know there was a Banned Books Week.
I didn't either.
But basically, it's an annual event which runs in September and October. It draws attention to the problem of censorship by raising awareness about freedom of expression. She says, you might think that burning books and censorship are things of the past, but hundreds of books continue to be challenged each year, reminding us that the freedom to choose which books we read is something we should not take for granted. So they put together some great quotes. So this first one is from Salman Rushdie. He was a British Indian novelist. He wrote like the Satan Diaries or something. I forget. It's not the right title, but he wrote a very, very famous book. Free speech is the whole thing, the whole ball game. Free speech is life itself. The next one is from Kurt Vonnegut, who's an American writer. I say let's get back to the good old-fashioned First Amendment of the good old-fashioned Constitution of the United States, and to heck with the censors. He says H-E double hockey sticks, but where you like to not, we like to bleep that stuff out. Give me knowledge or give me death is what he finishes it with. From Albert Camus, who's a French philosopher, talked a lot about individual freedom. A free press can be good or bad, but most certainly without freedom, a press will never be anything but bad. Something to think about. Okay, Oscar Wilde, an Irish poet. The books that the world calls immoral are books that show the world its own shame.
Ooh, I like that one.
That's very big.
That kind of relates to this, right?
Absolutely.
Like the things they don't want people to know are the things that they wish weren't true, maybe about their own products.
Right. It's basically saying shame on Big Pharma and the government because they don't want the world to see them as they truly are, is what he's saying. I'll read that again.
Read it again.
No,
do your DJ voice or your radio voice.
Okay, this is like my calm radio voice. The books that the world calls immoral are books that show the world its own shame. Oscar Wilde. Yeah, I think your laughing in the background made that even better.
Okay.
So
you sound like a woman with a deep voice.
Okay, right. Okay, now I'm going to read this next one and see if anyone knows who says this before I say who says it.
Okay.
When you tear out a man's tongue, you are not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say.
I've seen this a lot this week on Facebook going around, but I don't know who it is.
Tyrion Lannister.
I know what he looks like, though.
From George R.R. Martin's book, Game of Thrones. Yeah, I read the books. I have not seen the movies, but I've read the books. Tyrion. It's funny that they're quoting Tyrion Lannister, a fictional character. But anyway, okay. So we have Judy Blume. Did you read Judy Blume growing up?
I did.
Tales
not.
of a Fourth Grade Nothing, and
I didn't.
Hey God, It's Me, Margaret, and a children's preteen book writer.
I remember.
I believe that censorship grows out of fear, and because fear is contagious, some parents are easily swayed. Book banning satisfies their need to feel in control of their children's lives.
So just like this, to feel in
you
control.
Substitute government for parents and children for us, for the community.
I read the Babysitter's Club series.
Oh, okay.
That was mine.
Yeah,
that was kind of like the preteen book series. That was the one I
different
had.
than Judy Blume, I'm sure. So E.M. Forrester, an English novelist, he wrote a lot about class differences and a lot about hypocrisy. We are willing enough to praise freedom when she is safely tucked away in the past and cannot be a nuisance. In the present, amidst dangers whose outcome we cannot foresee, we get nervous about her and admit censorship. It's kind of deep. Okay, Heinrich Heine, who's a German Jewish poet. Where they have burned books, they will end in burning human beings. That's pretty harsh. Oh, now we've actually switched to the statements about burning books, away from censorship. Excuse me. Then we have Lemony Snicket, who's is a
Yes.
pen name for an American writer. When someone is burning a book, they are showing utter contempt for all of the thinking that produced its ideas, all of the labor that went into its
Yep.
words and sentences, and all of the trouble that befell the author.
I mean, that's true, though, because people don't realize that even in the stuff that we do, we've talked about the amount of work that goes into it.
Yeah.
And to just turn off a page or to just
Right.
make that person not visible anymore, it does really even, especially when they're not saying anything but facts,
Yeah.
it does take a lot away from the author.
And there's a Ray Bradbury, a very famous science fiction author. There is more than one way to burn a book, and the world is full of people running around with lit matches. We have Stephen Chbosky. He's an American novelist, and he's actually a director of his own movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I don't know if you saw that movie. He says, banning books gives us silence when we need speech.
And that's
It
true.
closes our ears when we need to listen. It makes us blind when we need sight. Noam Chomsky, an American philosopher, censorship is never over for those who have experienced it. It is a brand on the imagination that affects the individual who has suffered it forever. And then there's a few more. Malala Yousafzai. I'm butchering your name.
You're
I
killing
apologize.
these names.
Malala Yousafzai. Okay, everyone knows who she is. You might not recognize her name because I'm butchering it, but she's the female Pakistani activist who's been speaking up for female education for Pakistanis. The extremists are afraid of books and pens. The power of education frightens them. It's basically saying it's the extremists who are the ones who are doing the censorship. Lyndon B. Johnson, one of our presidents, books and ideas are the most effective weapons against intolerance and ignorance. Henry Giles, a Unitarian minister way back in the 1800s. The silent influence of books is a mighty power in the world. Silent, passive, and noiseless though they may be, they yet set in action countless multitudes and change the order of nations. And then it ends with a Chinese artist, YY. Censorship is saying, I'm the one who says the last sentence. Whatever you say, the conclusion is mine. But the internet is like a tree that is growing. The people will always have the last word, even if someone has a very weak, quiet voice. Such power will collapse because of a whisper. It's kind of deep.
I like that one. That's a good one to end on.
Yeah, I mean,
power will collapse because of a whisper. And I think sometimes parents feel like this is David versus Goliath. And how could you possibly make a difference? How could you possibly do anything? And feels like a whisper in a loud sea of cries,
Right.
essentially. But what that quote is saying is power can fall just from a whisper because the
Right.
people will ultimately win.
right. And
end.
I would say historically, this kind of power, I think has always fallen. The truth has to come out. It always does. And honestly, if we lose Facebook for a while, if we lose Amazon for a while, and if we lose Google, it just means we're going to continue to find, new ways to share information. That's again what podcasts are, and again, what books
and the in-person meeting thing, which we're going to be talking about.
You're right.
That's the biggest thing because you can't stop people from congregating
Right. I mean,
together.
we might end up just meeting in people's living rooms, every month, nationwide in groups,
in
having these conversations.
Huge groups of people doing that
Right.
and learning and educating and becoming invested in this topic in a way that the virtual situation doesn't really allow you the type of investment anyway. So you're actually way better off getting connected to people in person because that investment is lifelong.
Right.
The friendships, the connections, the support, the community is going to be lifelong. Facebook, as we can see, comes and goes, and so do the people on Facebook. It's so flippant.
Right.
Your virtual connections, the friendships, the things that you think are so deep-rooted really aren't when it comes to virtual life because the nature of a virtual connection is limited, superficial.
Right.
But real life interaction, that's where the power is. And that's where the education comes from. And that's what we'll continue to do.
Yeah. And I think that's what we try to build through podcasting, because we try to be personal. We try to share our lives with you guys.
Are you saying you're acting, Dr. Bob? Is that what you're saying? This isn't you. You're pretending to be personal? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it's the opposite of that.
You mean you're just being yourself?
We are being ourselves. And
well,
we're
why
creating,
wouldn't you?
Right. We're creating, we're just creating these connections with people through podcasting. But you're right. We are looking at also doing this in people's living rooms through one-on-one connections.
Don't tell them too much.
I know.
That's a sneak peek at something
because
coming.
Again, you're right. I mean, if you are sharing, lifestyle and medical choice information with people who you are building friendships with, that's where the truth really spreads, and people can really learn good information that way, and it's probably better that they learn it that way anyway.
And again, we need that community. So not only do you want to share information on this, but these are the people that you want to have dinner with and have your kids get to know and grow up with.
Right.
And this is what you need.
Censorship. I think it's only gonna help the vaccine safety advocacy cause. It's only going to help it, because it's just going to make us stronger. And I know it's going to backfire.
Fingers crossed for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so thanks for kind of walking through, I guess, with us with a kind of a heavy episode. I mean, it saddens us, but I think it also gets us kind of worked up even more to continue this fight. And so, we're not going anywhere. You guys don't go anywhere. And
we'll be here.
Yeah.
You'll be here. Together, we'll be here.
All right. Well, thanks you guys for hanging in there with us.
Oh, come on. That was funny.
Okay. It was funny. All right. Well, this is a vaccine conversation. For now, uncensored.
Uncensored.
And
uncut.
I know. I was thinking of cutting out that letter you wrote, little bit of it, but maybe I should. I don't want to be accused of censorship, right?
Not,
okay.
Yeah.
I guess we're not cutting it.
No.
I think that's fine. Okay, you guys. Well, we'll see you next time on the next episode.
Bye.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.